Hello, welcome to day 16, 365 days toward racial change. My name is Tom Nyback, and I appreciate you sticking around and spending time with us. We are informed by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson, and he's a great speaker, educator. I'm going to do a piece to kind of let us know more of his merits and things like that. It'd be nice if I could get him on the show sometime. We'll see what happens. I'm not that high on the radar just yet. Got a little ways to go. Got to pay my dues. We're informed by his book, A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask about race in America, being black, the history. Oh, he just brings out so many great points. Black labor and white wealth further focuses the discussion, power versus economic justice in America, the dynamic and how it works, how it prevails even to this day. And his book, Powernomics, a national plan to empower Black America. A side note, I am doing this video series a little bit late as far as understanding these terms. This whole subject is new to me, but I'll tell you, once I started watching his videos and things like that, it was just affirmation, and I just felt like I needed to run with it. I liken it to Darth Vader in The Empire Strikes Back. In the few of the opening scenes, he sends out probes all over the universe. He's looking for the rebels and Luke Skywalker and all that, the Force and stuff. But when he's shown this picture of a possible base, and he's like, "That's it." And that's what I feel like when I came in contact with this information just by chance. Actually, through one of his friends, introduced me to this subject. It'd be nice if we could all get together sometime and over dinner and talk about it. But when I heard Dr. Anderson, thought about my situation in America, I said, "That's it." And so I'm committed to making this year, dedicated a portion of this year to doing my part, articulating this information and working with it so that I can, just with my personal life, I can look out into the world, I can interact with whites, Asians, Hispanics, any other cultures, communities, and know where I'm at in that space, in that time. Even my financial life has changed. I've got a new way of looking at where my resources are going and how I can keep them with me and working for the Black community, all that stuff. Another work we're going to look at, we'll have some story time occasionally. We'll look at Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. Literature, very important. You think about literature, think about what impacts society, think about mankind having an oral tradition and how that oral tradition shaped the lives of people growing up in those times. Since I'm immersed in Western culture, white, powerful Western culture, I'm educated along those lines. Greek myths are a part of my internal conversation. So, oral traditions that talked about any Greek gods and things like that have an impact, had a way of shaping generations later of white folks or lighter colored people. And then you talk about the written works, as we get into things like ancient Greek texts like the Odyssey, Iliad, and how they form, how we get these god human characters like Achilles and Hercules and things like that, finding their way into the conversation, further into video, how soap operas, you look at a person, we say we have the word drama queen, somebody who's very, oh, you know, very Susan Lucci in their expression in life. There's some characters like that in Harriet Beecher Stowe's book. If you don't know who Susan Lucci is, Google her, or Google the soap opera All My Children. I used to watch that a lot. Anyway, so media, written works, oral traditions shape present day in a very powerful way. We need to acknowledge that. The Bible, how we feel about God, whatever our spiritual creed, our belief is, we're probably going to have some books laying around or some teachers that are consulting books or informed by literature. So while Harriet's book is fictional, it still has impacted black and white life in America to a great degree. Also behind me, don't forget hashtag us too, hashtag USTOO, and put that in your browser, search whatever. I know I've clicked around on Facebook occasionally, and there's more communities talking about blackness and issues and opportunities there as well. To get together, have you heard of the term meritorious manumission? And does that spark any, recognition in your mind at all? It didn't in mine. It's another one of those vague terms that I feel like I may have heard of way back in the day and whatnot. But it is a very prominent, it's something we really want to be aware of. We're going, of course, the roots are black slavery, white power, back mid 1600s, 1700s, slavery in America. And meritorious manumission is an important term, and it's an attitude. It's something that prevails to this day. It's going through some changes in America. America does that. America has a way of disguising the roots of a lot of things that happened in early America, but they're just as real and as powerful as today. Hence, we can talk about black poverty, racism, a lot of these things. They're not overtly shouted out in the streets like Jim Crow or anything like that, but they are still evident, still happening. You just can't prove it. So with meritorious manumission, it's a very important subject that needs to be introduced into this year-long discussion, because it was a policy in America in which it further entrenched blacks in their own slavery, in their own vulnerable condition, depraved condition. It's interesting, as I go through this, how, the white powerful slave system could just drop these little mental policies, these motifs into the black community, and the blacks would just run to it and run with it and respond appropriately to better whites. And meritorious manumission was one of the most powerful of the policies against blacks. There's in one of Dr. Anderson's books, he actually list state by state or colony by colony some of the policies, North and South, against blacks. Oh boy, it's just a host of things. Plus, of course, a whole lot of unwritten attitudes and beliefs that probably were plantation by plantation, colony by colony, things like that that probably were not recorded in history. But oh boy, it's a lot, and I talk about our literature, the impact, how it prevails, because it just does. You can't say, I'm starting to wonder what in my beliefs and my mentality prevails or persists from attitudes being handed down to me from my ancestors right up into my family life and my mother and father's approach to raising children. What do I still carry that I may not even be aware of from the damages done to slaves during our own black little Holocaust. So meritorious, we'll get with some definitions here. This is an introduction of Meritorious Manumission. Consult the notes, brief notes that I've included. And I do this by email mostly. I haven't checked the YouTube platform proper, so if you want to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with me by email. I just have a small email list. This is more of my personal thing. I'm not trying to win the world over. These are old arguments, and they're not going to go away anytime soon. But meritorious, something earned. I have awards that I got from school from my college days. I still got to finish that degree, but they're from my own merits. My energy put into some of these awards, and I was recognized for certain activities or my attitude or my academic achievement, things like that. Manumission is becoming free or freedom. So meritorious manumission. I earned my freedom, and the slave can earn that freedom by saving a white life, making an invention or a design that improved production, made white life easier and better. And our point today is they can earn it by snitching on blacks as far as informing whites that there's a resistance or a revolt about to happen. And this was a tool for whites, and it wasn't like when they introduced this policy that blacks came forward in droves and were set free, like there was a massive exodus of blacks. It was one of those things like a treat. You don't feed your dog treats. You give your dog treats once in a while. So I'm sure that even with this policy, it wasn't law. It was just policy. So, you come, I'm black, I come with a verifiable report of some of this activity that's going to threaten the white power, then I could possibly receive this meritorious manumission. But I better be prepared to settle for a slice of orange, maybe a day off from some hard labor. So the slaves go through this process of meritorious manumission and its policy. So Dr. Anderson says it kicked off about 150 years of activity where blacks are suspicious of one another. It's got to be careful about talking about running away or how to kind of get over on the white masters. Now you couple this with families being torn apart, constant selling of the slave, black slave men are castrated either physically or mentally by, and as far as mentally, like being degraded in front of the wife or children, kept under, making sure the community knows that he is the master's tool. There's no power for the black male. And the women are used sometimes to bear children, or at least have sex with the slave master. So this constant oppression, erosion of black life, no mental anchor. We talked about religion, how the white master infiltrates there, and I encourage blacks to do some more critical thinking on their own about their relationship with God and approaching God, things like that. So you had this system where it was formally constructed where blacks could tell on other blacks and be rewarded. Now they were rewarded themselves. The black community was not rewarded. But then you carry this idea along. So where blacks are not, this thing where blacks, of course, it's get discouraged in the black community. But here's what the white power did. Coming up to this modern day, it's 21st century, where snitching, the telling is still discouraged by black communities, but black communities are discouraging the telling of criminal behavior that's eroding black life. It's an interesting parallel that's developed, and how white power still comes out on top. It appropriates this activity to serve itself. There's some genius happening there behind the scenes that we're not seeing. In Meritorious Manumission, the rewards were limited to that individual, and they were elevated, freed, or given some new resource. Now with modern day silence, maybe a few blacks engaged in criminal behavior that is successful, maybe they succeed and rise up, but where's the real benefit to the black community? In Meritorious Manumission, blacks are kept underneath white power, white privilege, access to white wealth. In modern day silence, blacks have to live in this erosion and dysfunction in their community. Pretty hard to rise up from that. In Meritorious Manumission, the participants are agreeing and condoning with slavery and the slavery behavior. And our modern day silence, we're condoning illegal behavior. And don't get me wrong, both, like going against both systems could be deadly, as we're going to see as far as Meritorious Manumission, and you dare not be in a black hood or community and be noted as a person telling on these armed drug dealers down the street. So we gotta massage that whole system. But in wise ways, we can find a way to address that. Meritorious Manumission kept the slaves divided. There's still division in modern day silence because of skepticism. This any illegal behavior in the hood isn't designed to help the hood. You know, it doesn't matter that maybe during the holidays, you know, like I think his name was Frank somebody way back in the 70s New York, you know, became a real big kingpin through the sale of heroin and all that, but there was a lot of death and stuff and violence, you know, and maybe during the holidays he did hand out turkeys and maybe did stuff for the community, but it just doesn't equate, you know. So in our modern day science, there's still skepticism, you know. How do you trust this criminal in the midst? Meritorious Manumission helped white power, or modern day silence assist white power in that the white power knows where, how, who drugs are happening. You don't get it's a known activity, you know, and it's very controlled. And the thing is, when white power decides to cut it off, they just sweep in. Law enforcement has job security. The judicial system gets job security. The penal system, job security. Oh boy, what else? You know, and the gang activity, the violence is job security. These resources leaving the community go into maybe pockets, South American pockets. You know, you go down South America where Colombia or wherever cocaine at least comes from, you'll see some villas that I probably built as far as how long I've been immersed as a user in that the drug system and the drug economics. Okay, and nothing, not a penny of mine through that activity went towards building up and supporting the black community. So it all went to other powers and groups competing for resources and wealth against blacks in America. And that's another point. No wealth returns. The wealth leaves the community, and there's no. It's not reciprocal. You know, I studied electronics for a long time. You think about electricity, where when the circuit's open, nothing can happen. There's some aspects of life where, yeah, maybe there needs to be a flow of resources that come in and out. Think about how humans eat food. We eat food, we ingest through our mouth, you know, and it comes out and is disposed of. But that would work well if the white community shared in that way, but they don't. They have a closed system where the resources come in. They let these resources in, they come in, and it circulates within their community like that. You know, they just like some type of vortex or black hole. They just continue to absorb this energy, and they grow from it. Asians do it, Hispanics do it. Black people are the only community where we essentially we go and gather resources in our respective fields, our plantations, and then we give it up to other cultures, peoples in competition with us. The activity of meritorious manumission is a facet of how that works economically, but it's a mental condition within American society in which where blacks could be rewarded for giving up other blacks and enriching the white power, supporting white power. Now it went through a metamorphosis where black silence now enriches black power and is deleterious towards the black community. Now, don't go rushing out your door waving banners and calling the police and all that. That's a complicated issue. It's not simply, oh, just turn around and start being police. Because there again, you're working for whites. What do you get in return for that activity? So that's a complicated discussion. I don't even know if I'll get much into that, because blacks just are going to have to learn to stop helping white culture in that way through that activity. So, but at the same time, we need to be sensitive on how whites are using, almost any black activity for white benefit. Okay, Meritorious Manumission was a big one. So there's our introduction. Remember that it's whatever it's used for, whether it's the 1700s and where blacks informed on other blacks and people were enriched the white system through that, through this carrot called freedom or whatever, or whether it's modern day silence, where the modern day silence is still, what I'm trying to express is modern day silence is a type of meritorious manumission, in that you are assisting and keeping the black community dependent and stagnated in its vulnerable state, and still enriching white folks and other cultures, communities in competition with blacks. So there's a brief introduction. Let's talk tomorrow about some specifics, some examples, some stories from way back when, and the genesis of Meritorious Manumission. I'm Tom Lynn's Nyback. Thanks again for stopping by.